this.
Welcome back to Don's Life. Welcome to the channel. Thanks for joining today. Looking outside, it is my second winter just starting with my GMC Sierra AT4. And as I browse the forums and just keep up to date with ownership of this truck and share a lot of that experience with you, I can't help but notice the amount of people that aren't quite sure what they should set their transfer case to when they're driving. So full disclaimer, if you want more details than what this video is going to show, check your owner's manual, do your own research, but I'm going to share with you when I would choose to stay in two-wheel drive, auto, 4 high or 4 low, and the answers might surprise you. Let's go. So I'm going to preface this video before we start talking about drive modes that we're not talking about tire condition, the type of tires that you have, whether they're studded or not, how much air pressure is in them, what the ambient temperature is outside, where the weight is in your vehicle. Are you carrying weight in the back? Is it distributed above the rear axle? Is it more forward? Is it more back? There's many factors that can play into how you would drive the vehicle and how its traction would be impacted depending on a number of factors. We're just going to look at the conditions that we have before us. The truck is just myself and a passenger, and we're just going to look at how at least I would choose what drive mode I would be in and give you some insight as to why. So this is a bit of a beginner's take when it comes to using your transfer case in the various modes. I say that because even though you may live in an area that doesn't have snow and ice like I do, you're going to leave it in two-wheel drive most of the time or 2 high. I leave mine in two-wheel drive or 2 high most of the time as well, probably 90% or more. And I'll explain why as we go through the video. But first off, you're only driving the rear axle, and that's going to be the most fuel economic. But in most conditions, depending on what you're doing, that is usually sufficient to propel the vehicle. Not always, but usually sufficient. So why don't we start the vehicle? We'll get out on the road. We'll have a look at just my street. And we just encountered a blizzard that started yesterday in our city, but it's been going through the prairies of Canada now for several days. Edmonton and Calgary got hit the worst, and they're going to get hit again. My city only got a light dusting, but it was still enough to be able to give you examples for this video. All right, we are in two-wheel drive. We are going to go out on my street and we're going to see what's what when it comes to traction. This is probably what I do most of the time is I will go out when we have conditions like this and just give it a little bit of a test and see where the limits of the vehicle are and where I'm going to need some aid. So we do have traction aids available in this vehicle. We have stability control, we have traction control. I'm not going to lean on those things that are going to be on by default. I'm going to talk more about just when I would choose what setting I would have my drive mode on. So without further ado, let's turn off the parking brake and get back here. So if you look in front of us, maybe we can look out the window here. You see on the ground there, it's all snow and ice. And I'm able to plow through it in two-wheel drive. Here I am, just two-wheel drive, driving along. I am feeling some slippage. You can see my traction control down here. I'll demonstrate again. I'll give it a little bit of throttle. You can see my traction control is trying to compensate for my slippage. But you can see we have a little bit of snow drifts. We have ice. I'm going to slam on the brakes right here. My ABS will probably kick on. We're going to go this way here. Just pulling out of my street. I'm able to do it in two-wheel drive. Definitely sliding around. So in conditions like this, where I already know within a minute of leaving my house that I'm going to slip as I give it throttle, this is when I would use auto, because it is for when you have intermittent traction and my surface isn't stable. This is not dry, clean pavement, which is where I'd want to use two-wheel drive. And I am using it right now still, and I'm able to get by. But if I want that extra traction automatically, here's where I would use auto. It's auto shifting right now to auto four-wheel drive. And now it's in, it says auto up here on the dash. And now when I take this corner, I'm still getting some slippage, but it's grabbing from the front because it's turning the front axle on just as I need it. Now it's important to note, and please do your own research here, that if you've put an aftermarket lift on your vehicle, some of those lift kits in the fine print, or some even in bold, they'll tell you not to run auto in your transfer case settings with their lift kit installed. So do your own research. I'm not going to speak too much to that, but essentially what is happening is the CV angles have changed with that lift kit, and depending on that geometry, as my front axle is engaging to get that traction, it can cause premature wear on those components a little more because you have that lift kit installed. So do your own research there. I'm not going to comment on which brands and which ones I'd recommend. That's not what this is about. This is about when would I use auto, and this is essentially a stock truck. I do have some Bilstein shocks up front that added a 1.1 inch lift, but it's not enough to change the axles or the behavior of the auto transfer case. So right now we're using auto. I can accelerate just fine. My traction is okay for propelling me forward, but I am respectful of the surface I'm on, which is ice in this case, and four-wheel drive auto or not, my ability to stop is not going to be any better than if I was in two-wheel drive, four high, four low, doesn't matter. Stopping the vehicle does not change based on what my transfer case is set at. But we're going to continue on here and look at some other scenarios. I'm not slipping a lot while I'm driving. I'm being very modest with the throttle. But where I notice the biggest improvement is at intersections. So we're coming up to a four-way stop here. I'm going to turn left, but it's leaving this intersection where I'm going to want traction just for that moment. And then I probably don't need the extra traction after that. So as the vehicle comes to a stop, now that I have it in auto, I'm going to give it some aggressive throttle, and it's adjusting the torque just to make sure that I'm getting the right amount to get traction around that turn. Once I got straight again, it gave me a boost of power because as it was turning, it was compensating and sensing where the slippage was and pulling and pushing me through that intersection. So that's where I see the benefits of auto. I can go back to two-wheel drive right now. It's just shifting. Now I'm back in two-wheel drive and I don't really notice a difference when I'm modest with the throttle. But if I was to give it some throttle, and I'm just watching the other cars here so I don't do anything stupid, but if I was to wait for them to pass here, actually I'll turn down this street and I'll give it a little bit of throttle in two-wheel drive. Oh, look at this, I'm slipping, sliding away. There we go. Give it a little bit of throttle here. I'm just spinning out. My traction aids are, stifling the engine, so I'm not giving it too much torque. Nothing's happening. Not moving. Put it in auto. Do the same thing. It'll sense that there's slippage, but it moved some power to the front, and now I can go. So I'm driving a little more aggressively in a safe manner just to demonstrate some of the features. So we're in auto again, making this turn no problem. But because I'm engaging the front axle, I am losing that little bit of fuel economy, but for that benefit, it's worth it. So in these conditions that you've seen so far, parking lot conditions, residential streets, auto makes sense because I'm going to encounter several areas where I'm going to slip, and I could use that extra boost of traction.
Hi, thank you for waiting. What can I help you today? Anything else for you today?
No, that should be good.
Right, that'll be Tokyo. I'll check that a little bit.
Had to stop for our Tim Hortons. We are in Canada after all. Now earlier this morning, this road that we're on near my place was sheer ice. It's starting to warm up. They've already threw some sand down to take care of the roads, but we're going to go somewhere just to demonstrate when we might want to use 4 high or 4 low. So hopefully up ahead we can find a spot to do that. All right, I'm actually having a hard time finding anywhere that I would use true four-wheel drive for high or for low. So I might have to talk my way through it as opposed to demonstrating it. But I'm in a large parking lot here, and the way our blizzard came in is the wind swept from west to east. So we have drifts built up in certain areas, and some areas are flat and bare. But the crews have been out already clearing main areas, so it's a little bit tough to find some buildup to trek through to show you. But let me just talk about four-wheel drive anyway, just so you can get an idea. So we have some drift buildup here. I'm not sure if it shows up on camera very well, but there is up to a foot of snow, depending on where you need to go through. Now, if it was conditions like this for several miles, kilometers, whatever, then I would consider putting it into 4 high, just because that way I can still go to speed and I would have maximum traction to pull or push my way through it. But I'd be able to get through this just in auto. But there are some drawbacks when you're in four-wheel drive all the time, and I'll talk about a few of them. So first is going to be your turning radius, especially when you try to park. So I'm just going to put it in 4 high right now. We're shifting to 4 high. We're in 4 high. So when I go to turn, the wheels actually, they grab much differently. Instead of the vehicle pushing the front axle is now active, and it's trying to pull as we go through snow like this. So I'll film a little bit of that footage from the outside, but you'll probably notice the wheels don't quite behave the same way as when you're in two-wheel drive. So what you might not have been able to tell from the outside was the jitteriness or roughness of being in four-wheel drive and cranking the wheel. So here's the wheel almost fully cranked, and watch when I give it a little bit of acceleration. See the jerkiness? That is not something that would happen in two-wheel drive. Case in point, we'll put it in two-wheel drive. We'll crank the wheel again. We're going through deeper snow here. Smooth on the throttle, and you can see it's smooth. It's not jerky like it was in four-wheel drive. So there's extra wear and tear that you're putting on that front axle when you're in four-wheel drive, that if you're not using the traction that it's giving to you, there's no point in having it on. So that's why most of the time you don't need to have four-wheel drive engaged, at least in these snow and ice conditions, unless you need to really pull yourself and get maximum traction in the deep snow, then that's different. And of course, mud and sand and other terrain like that, that's a whole nother set of variables and things we can talk about. This is more or less when to use 4 high or 4 low with ice and snow. And as you can see, just based on the driving I've done in my city, and again, this is anecdotal because this is from my point of view and my opinion, I haven't really needed 4 high or 4 low for anything at all. I used auto just to get that little extra traction, leaving intersections and just, areas on my street and some various other areas where I knew that I would have slippage in intermittent or possibly even above average situations. Two-wheel drive will get me most places, including through any of the terrain here in this parking lot with these drifts. Now 4 low is going to be used when you're wanting to pull or push yourself out of an area where you may be getting stuck or at risk of getting stuck, where you don't need to be driving quickly. So if I'm in drive, which I am, and I just hit 4 low, it's going to instruct me that I need to be in neutral to make that shift. So we'll put it in neutral here. And now four-wheel drive shift is in progress. My 4 low indicator is on. So this isn't something that we can do on the fly. You have to be in neutral when you do the shift. Now you might have noticed it said my stability control was off. That's intentional because it's looking to get maximum power to each axle to get me through a situation, probably deep snow, mud, that type of thing. So now when I shift it into drive, I have no traction control, my stability control is all turned off, and when I give it gas, I'm limited to the output of my speed, and it's going to focus on just delivering maximum traction where I need it. Because we're in a four-wheel drive mode, it's very jerky, just going slow on smooth terrain. As you can see, I don't even have the wheel fully locked over, and it's very jerky. It's just looking to get me through an area with low traction. So for low, I seldom use it, but I have used it in off-road conditions, which is primarily where you would use it. Maybe you're towing a trailer through something like this or some mud, and you want 4 low just to pull it through nice and slow. That's where you would use 4 low. 4 high would probably get you through it, but I don't use those modes that often unless I'm intentionally going somewhere where I'm not going to have very good traction. So we're going to get out of 4 low right now and put it into 4 high. Make sure we're in neutral. There, our traction control and everything's turned back on. We're now in 4 high. I can put it into drive, but I'm actually going to put it in L9 because I like the sound of the engine that way. I won't have any DFM turned on. I'm going to turn off my traction control. I'm going to hold it down until ESC is also turned off. There, so I have no traction control, no stability control. My wheels are just going to turn when I give them gas. It's not going to worry about slippage or anything like that. Why would I do that? Well, I am in a parking lot after all, and there's no other vehicles around, so maybe, just maybe, I can test to see if all my axles are performing properly when in 4 high. So if you don't want to watch this part, this is where you can end the video, but I just want to see what happens when we crank the wheel. I can't just do left turns. This isn't NASCAR. So all fun and games aside, that was just the inner kid me. I had to get that out of my system. The intent of this video was just to shed a little bit of light or add some insight to those folks that wondered when is the appropriate time to use auto 4-wheel drive in their GMC Sierra AT4, perhaps other vehicles that have the same transmission options. Honestly, use it for extra traction when you know that you're going to need it. 2-wheel drive is going to be probably your best option most of the time. But auto is a nice feature to have, especially when we need to get through things like this. So I'm in auto 2-wheel drive still. Just gotta wait for this red pickup. And then I think we'll have our opportunity, and we're gonna give her, there we go. Plowed right through it, no problem. A little bit of sliding, but that's okay. We're safe. So auto works very well in conditions like this. I'd still feel safe in 2-wheel drive, but I have the benefit of that extra traction, hence why I would use auto. But 4-wheel drive, 4 high, 4 low, personally, I find they're used in a limited manner, and they are more specialized for certain situations. My opinion, also based on where I live. If I was in Alaska, maybe I would say I use 4-wheel drive all the time. Again, this is a half-ton truck. It's light duty. If you have a 3/4 ton, a 1 ton, something that is designed for 4-wheel drive all the time, fine, no problem. My 2013 Sierra Denali had full-time all-wheel drive. I couldn't shift to 4 high. It was just always in all-wheel drive, or I could put it in low. But that's the options that I had at that time. So we are going to use auto to get through this last intersection before I get home. But if you like today's video, hit that like button. Please consider subscribing, and we'll talk to you next time.